Okay, we'll call the meeting to order.
Early yet, mate.
Ms. Whitten, would you take roll for us, please?
Supervisor Lewis,
Present.
Supervisor Day,
Here.
Supervisor Ayers, here, Supervisor Lyons,
Here.
Chairman McDaniel.
Here. We ask that you please stand. Dr. Lyons will give us the invocation and then followed by pledge of allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day. We ask that you bless us and all present and bless all the people of Rockbridge County. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting. Do our best to take citizens' comment remotely. There are two options for citizens to join by telephone. You may dial in or the one of the numbers listed on the county website. Or if you wish to make a citizen comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, sir. There are two.
And
Consideration to confirm the school board's use of school capital reserve fund to fund A&E services for study and design of Floyd SK improvements. And also the second one is consideration to set public hearing for the old courthouse transaction, the deed transaction which took place there.
And I asked the county administrator for those two items to be presented to the board tonight. Do we need a motion to add those? Do you need individual motions for each one?
No, I think we can add both of them.
All right. Is there a motion to add the two items to the agenda?
So many.
Second.
Second.
Supervisor Day,
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers,
Yes.
Supervisor Lyons,
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis.
Aye.
And chair votes yes. Recognitions and presentations. Mr. Suter.
Yes, Mr. Kingery's here to introduce some staff. We got Robert Connor, David Crawford, and Blaine Black. If you all would come forward and you can just introduce our new folks. Well, some newer than others, really.
Yeah, he just got here, didn't he?
Good evening, guys. It's good to be here tonight. I'm here to introduce our staff. Some of the staff that we have been with us for 2 years, and we have failed to be here due to COVID. So COVID restraints have been lifted, and we're here tonight to introduce David Crawford. David has been with us since January of 2020. He came to us from Augusta County and a dealership there, and we've been really fortunate to have him. He's doing really good work for the county. Proud that he joined our staff. He lives in South River area. Then we have Robert Connor. Robert Connor joined with us March 23rd of 2020, and he came to us from Peterbilt. He's been with us now for 2 years, and he's doing an outstanding job. I'm very pleased to have him as well. He is from Plank Road, so those guys are local residents of the county. And then we have Blaine Black, who joined us February 1st. And so he's got a couple weeks under his belt, and he's doing a good job for us. We have definitely a good staff. Appreciate the opportunity.
Did you teach any of them?
I did. I had these two gentlemen when I was at the hospital.
But we're glad to have you. I mean, appreciate all that you do to help us and your customers. Yes.
Thank you all
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
They were significantly short-staffed through a lot of COVID, and got to thank Steve and the guys that really helped out. And then Chris is going to introduce our new zoning technician, Zach Seastrom.
Evening. Pleasure to introduce Zach Seastrom. He joined the Office of Community Development as the zoning technician on February the 1st. So that,
Yep, my name's Zach Seastrom. I'm from Harrisonburg and I'm the new zoning tech. So pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you guys.
he sort of hit the ground running with
Yeah.
us, obviously.
And just a fun fact, my first day of school, I rode the school bus and I'm pretty sure that I sat beside his uncle. And we went through high school all the way together. So we made that connection when he got here.
Okay, moving on to citizen comments. Is there anyone signed up to speak? Okay. Is there anyone online who wishes to speak?
No, sir.
Are there any emails or letters that need to be read into the minutes?
No, sir.
Okay, we have approval of minutes. I believe everybody has been given a copy. Is there any changes or additions, corrections, anything that you see need to be done?
And there's two sets, February 2nd budget meeting and February 14 regular meeting.
There's no questions, comments, or concerns. Is a motion to approve? So moved. And second?
Second.
All right, Supervisor Lyons?
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers?
Yes.
Supervisor Day?
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes. All right, we have consideration of farmer's market application for Steve Hart.
If Mr. Hart's joining us via Zoom, if you could promote him to a panelist, please. Mr. Hart, landowner and organizer of the Carrs Creek Community Market, has made an application. He's joining us via Zoom. I believe he is out of the area. So this will be the third year of the Carrs Creek Community Market. The property is located at 2766 West Midland Trail, Lexington, Virginia, 24450. Is further identified as tax map number 47-A-54 and currently consists of 84.775 acres. So in your package, you have the agenda item, of course. You have a schematic plan showing the location of the farmers market in relationship to the additional 84 acres that the Hart family owns there. And a written description of the proposed plans. With that, without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Hart. Mr. Hart, we can see you, but I do see you're muted. So, yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you for consideration of the farmer's market. It's the same market. We've operated in the same place for the past 2 years. Really, nothing has changed. We've added a couple of new vendors, and some of our other vendors have been so successful that they moved on to bigger and larger things, which is absolutely good. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question for Mr. Slayton, but Mr. Hart, you're off the hook as far as I'm concerned. I know I ask this, I think every time, procedurally, we have to review this annually.
I believe it's chapter 4, amusement and entertainment, section 5, art, farmers market. I believe that is a correct statement. That is an annual review of the permit. Yes. Per the county code.
Are there fees associated with that?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not for outdoor events. No, sir.
Is there a motion to approve? So moved. Second?
Second.
Supervisor Lyons?
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
Supervisor Day?
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Declaration of surplus property. Mr. Seward?
Yes, Rockbridge County Fleet Services Department is holding 4 vehicles at their facility for consideration of disposal of surplus property. I did provide those in the table that you've been given. And there are no governmental departments who requested these as being needed. Often we will We will pass them on to either ourselves or someone else. These are mainly Sheriff's Department vehicles. And in accordance with our policy, surplus property should be declared as such by the governing body and disposed of in a manner which is open and equitable. I have to admit that we did jump the gun a little bit on these, and these have been advertised on GovDeals already, and we realized that. And so when we realized that mistake, we simply extended the auction closing date past this board meeting so that the board could have opportunity to do this the right way. Resolution is attached in your package for consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and just ask that the board approve the resolution.
Any questions, comments?
And we do check with Mr. Kingery. He is the keeper of all records and conditions about the conditions of the vehicle and whether or not sometimes you get one that is brought back in that we can really have a reuse for, and none of these were in that category.
Is it age of the vehicle or mileage or wear and tear that?
It's all of the above plus the replacement cycle. When they come off and there's a new car coming on, there's no point in keeping the old one. Sometimes they're in better condition, and we run on, a fair amount of them for the county. We will occasionally we'll get a good one, and we will run it for many, many more miles.
I was just wondering, I was looking at the mileage, and while it is high mileage, you would hope vehicles today would hit a little higher than that.
Yeah, like the 2011 Crown Vic, it's pushing 11 years old. It's only got 126,000 on it, which to me, in my household, is a baby. But you also, we have to go on what Steve tells us and what he recommends. If it's going to need a transmission, whatever, if there's had major problems, we go ahead and get rid of them, and we're honest about it when we put them on GovDeals. I don't know any specifics about these four.
Good time to sell a car.
Super fair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, go right ahead.
I move we declare them surplus and put them up for auction or sale.
Is there a second?
Second.
Supervisor Day?
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
Supervisor Ayers?
Yes.
Supervisor Lyons?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. All right, I believe we'll add our changes to the agenda at this point. The first item to add would be consideration to confirm the school board's use of school capital reserve to fund the A&E services for study and design of the Floyd SK improvements.
Yes, you may recall last year during a joint meeting with the school board, I believe it was last September, the Floyd SK project was discussed. Both boards at that time agreed to move ahead with the planning process, and that required issuance of an RFP by the Rockbridge County Public Schools for A&E services. They have done that, and they reviewed and ranked proposals and have negotiated a price with the top ranked proposer. Dr. Thompson contacted me late last week to ensure in advance that the schools in the county were still on the same page before they sign a contract, which I greatly appreciated that he followed back up with that. The original discussion last fall included a rough estimate of $725,000 for A&E costs. I've provided you with the school's meeting minutes, the approved meeting minutes, and the applicable discussion is recorded about halfway down the second page. The number that they have negotiated is less than that, about $125,000 less at right around $600,000. And Dr. Thompson's mind, everybody that I've talked to, our recollection is these funds would be taken from the school capital reserve account and then reimbursed after a bond sale, which could occur this fall. We have to do a reimbursement resolution. I think that the original concern was that we could spend the $725,000 or whatever large number it was, only to find the construction costs exceeded our ability to pay. However, today I did confirm with Dr. Thompson that the A&E contract has a phased approach. So it's a pay-as-you-go contract. You get a phase one figure out what the cost would be, determine jointly if it's something that can be further considered, and then move ahead in a phased approach. At this point, we'd just like to see if there's consensus for the school division to execute a contract and begin the phased work, utilizing the school's capital reserve fund, with the understanding that if and when there is borrowing, we would seek reimbursement resolution to replenish that fund with bond proceeds. And Ms. Huffman and I would work with bond counsel on the timing of that reimbursement resolution. There's certain parameters that must be met. You can only reach back so far, and it has to be done within a certain amount of time. So we would make sure we met those parameters. And since this was added officially to the agenda, this could be by vote or it could be by consensus on what you recalled from the past conversation in the minutes.
I did speak with Dr. Thompson as well, and he did confirm that the figure is from start to finish. That includes, would be drawings and everything included. So the only thing, it may be some slight cost overruns, you know, if there's changes or required visits by the design firm. I would assume that those costs would come out of the escrow account as well to cover for the school, and then they would be reimbursed through if funding was sought to be reimbursed for the first draw.
Yes, I mean, the reimbursement resolution would cover A&E costs. That's how we'd write it, so that you could do a reach back. And Ms. Huffman and I discussed today, and our collective memory on this, without having looked at it, is you can reach back about 6 months.
You know, the Floyd SK building is reaching an age to where, you know, something has to be done, and it's good for our students, it's good for our community. I think if we look at the career and technical education aspect of our educational system, so I, for one, think it's a good deal for the county to look at and move forward. And I would ask if there is a motion and a second, so we can take a vote to allow the schools to access their escrow account to pay for the A&E study.
That's so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, comments, concerns before we take a vote?
I'm just glad the number's going in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. Supervisor Ayers,
Yes.
Supervisor Day,
Yes.
Supervisor Lyons,
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis,
Aye.
and Chair votes yes. Okay, the second item that we added to the agenda is consideration to schedule a public hearing on the old courthouse transaction.
Okay, so you can recall that, and what Ms. Huffman might be saying, I might have misnamed this probably, but anyway, you may recall that the county sold the old courthouse to Rockbridge Partners LLC back in the mid to late 2000s. They repurposed the building and leased it to W&L for office space. The covenants of the sale included language that they would basically do what they said they were going to do. They wouldn't raise the building, and they would, you know, keep some historical aspects to it and preserve it in good condition. So John Adamson, a partner in the group, contacted me late last week requesting a letter of certification confirming that they did just that. And that Ms. Huffman looked into it, and that does require a public hearing. Of course, in order to schedule a public hearing, the board needs to approve that to schedule a public hearing. And we didn't want to hold them up any more than we have to. So we asked to walk it on to this agenda, since we just learned about this late Thursday or Friday, and to ask to schedule that public hearing on March 14th. I did provide the board earlier with the application section, or the applicable section of the recorded deed, and also a letter from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources confirming successful completion to their standards of this project. And we just recommend adding this as a public hearing for March 14th for these purposes.
Is there any questions, concerns, comments? there a motion to add the public hearing on March 14th? So move. Second?
Second.
Okay. Supervisor Lyons?
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
Supervisor Day?
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers?
Yes.
And chair votes yes as well. Before we move on to appointments, I've missed a couple meetings and I'm a little out of practice. I believe, if it's okay with the board, I didn't ask anybody in attendance if you had any comments, citizen comments that you wanted to portray to the board. Seeing no hands, we'll move along. I apologize for that. All right, we have appointments, Community Service Board. Jade Nix no longer serving. Applications have been received. I believe we have an application from Mr. Coleman of Walker's Creek, an application by Mr. Peterson out of Rockbridge, and an application by Ms. Burgess out of Buffalo. We have 2 slots to fill. Is there any discussion on any of the candidates?
It's good to see so much interest.
I think we got 3 quality candidates. My only concern is that Mr. Coleman's application states that he can attend meetings at night, and their meetings are held during the afternoon.
He can attend meetings at any time. That must be,
No, I'm just going by what he said.
I'm not saying you're not, but in discussing it with him and talking to him about it, I know that he can. I'm sorry that was put that way. But I can attest that he can and is prepared to when I asked him to do it.
Do you have anything?
You want a motion, one,
Let's do one at a time. How's that?
And just to note, the first one would be a full term almost a full term that would expire December 31, 2024. Mr. Brownlee's would just be filling out his term that would expire December 31, 2023. So one of these is essentially for 2 years, one of them's for 3. So the first one that you're looking at here was for Ms. Nick. That would be a 3-year appointment.
Okay, so let's do that one first.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Sharon Burgess to fill J. Nix.
And I second that.
Okay, so to fill the 12/31/2024 slot, we have a nominee of Ms. Burgess. Supervisor Day,
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers,
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis,
Aye.
Supervisor Lyons,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Now we have the 12/31/2023 term for Mr. Brownlee. You know, I didn't see the information about, and I'm not sure if it is, as Mr. Lewis said, may not be any conflict at all. You know, I had reached out to Mr. Peterson to ask him if he would be interested on Community Service Board. But, and he agreed. I feel he would be a worthy candidate. I don't know, Mr. Coleman. Is there anything that?
No, he's the first, I asked him, he's the first one who applied. So it's we're in a pickle with having so many qualified candidates for once. So with deference to Mr. Pedersen, the reason I asked Mr. Coleman to do it was that I would support him. So I'm sort of bound to being a person of my word to nominate him. So that's what I was prepared to do for one of these slots. Again, for a while now, but with not everybody being here and myself included, we hadn't gotten there till now, but that would have been my motivation 2 months ago.
Well, one thing we could do, since on the application, it does clearly, to my memory, that I looked at last time, that Mr. Coleman can't meet in the evening. Perhaps we can clarify this and perhaps we can put him on the list for the very next one. Could we do
Wow.
that? And
Well, yeah, sure. But I'm telling you that that's not the case, but I'll note that and remember that. That's fine.
Is there a motion for one of the two applicants to fill the term?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Torben Peterson to the position.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Supervisor Lyons?
Yes.
Supervisor Ayers?
Yes.
Supervisor Day?
Yes.
Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes as well. Congratulations, Mr. Peters. Correct. Congratulations to Ms. Burris. We appreciate your support and willingness to serve. The RARO Board of Directors, we have an unexpired term for Mr. Henney that runs through June of 2025. I personally have reached out to Mr. Coffey to discuss a couple candidates, and we haven't settled on anything. I don't know if anybody else has candidates that you'd like to.
I don't believe we have any, do we have any applications? So I can say that the board is doing quite well, and we have, we can wait until we find somebody from your district to fill that position, so.
And if anybody has a member from their district that you overwhelmingly feel confident in, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to discuss that as well. Okay. We have public hearings coming up in about 4 minutes. Is there anything else that you have needs to be discussed before we get to that?
Sir.
Board members, is there anything that you'd like to discuss for a few minutes before we get to public hearing? Hearing none, we'll just take a quick pause. We'll resume the Crown Hardwood public hearing at 6 p.m.
So how's Finance Committee moving all right along? Whittling and cutting and
Okay, so we have the Crown Hardwood special exception permit to operate a wood yard in agricultural and general uses zoning district. Mr. Slayton?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gavin Worley with Perkins and Orson is here along with representatives of the applicant Crown Hardwoods. Bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen. All right, again, this is Crown Hardwoods Company's special exception application for a wood yard in the agricultural and general uses zoning district. That's going to be the A2 zoning district. A little bit about the property details. The property is located at 3505 West Midland Trail, Lexington, Virginia. Property is located in the agricultural and general use district. Again, that's the A2 zoning district, occupying 5.14 acres per tax record. It's a recent unrecorded plat, as far as I know, unrecorded plat, showing the property at 6.136 acres. This has actually been modified. I will note that this map here that's shown on all our slides is the modified property boundaries. The tax maps actually showed Mr. BB Ayers and Sons Incorporated, BB Ayers and Sons Incorporated owning to the creek, which is incorrect. They do own I believe it was a 50-foot sliver to the creek. And so we've obviously updated the GIS for this purpose. Currently owned by BB Ayers and Sons and was previously utilized for an excavation company. The majority site is in the 100-year floodplain, as shown here. That is according to FEMA, determined by FEMA and shown on firm panel number 511C250. And our effective date of our firm panels is April 6, 2000. Section 608-13, 1 through 12 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations review the additional factors to be satisfied in the development within a 100-year floodplain. That section is included in your ordinance with Mr. Orson's with Perkins and Orson's responses to each of those. As far as the special exception process itself or special application itself, Crown Hardwood has applied to operate a wood yard. The site will be utilized to store and grade yards before shipping them elsewhere. Currently operating in the Fairfield area with obvious plans to move to this location. Current plans include the addition of gravel to the site as well as a cable fence, a portion of the south and east side of the property. Additionally, their current plans include the addition of a landscape buffer along West Midland Trail, eastern property line, and a portion of the western property line. So as you can see on the plan that was also included in your package, the landscaping is shown along West Midland Trail, along the western property line, and then along the eastern property line as well. As far as the Planning Commission recommendation on September 8th and September 8th, 2021 and January 12th, 2022, the Planning Commission held public hearings and has recommended approval of the special exception application with the following conditions. Number one, substantial compliance with the site plan or plan prepared by Perkins and Orson titled Crown Hardwoods Incorporated. Site and special exception plan dated December 20th, 2021, and revised dates with December 29th, 2021, January 7th, 2022, and January 20th, 2022. That latest plan, of course, with the January 20th, 2022 date is in your package and was previously displayed on the screen. Number two, no use of machinery, grading or sorting of logs, loading or unloading of trucks, or other activities creating excess light or noise shall be conducted between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. with the exception of 1 or 2 idling trucks waiting to be unloaded. Sunday operation shall not be allowed and no equipment shall be used on Sunday except for as needed for the following permitted activities. A, property maintenance and repairs. B, equipment repairs, maintenance and installation improvements. And C, grading, log grading and scaling, not to include sorting. Exterior activities that produce noise shall be limited to, between the hours of 12 noon and 4 p.m. Number 4, conditions number 2 and number 3 will not apply during preparing the site for potential flooding. Number 5, the log yard is to be watered down as needed to control dust. And number 6, upon approval contingent upon E&S, erosion sediment control, stormwater management, and the Virginia Department of Transportation approvals. I will add that just today, I believe it was, that the Virginia Department of Transportation has approved the proposed entrance location with improvements. Under the current draft conditions, it would not be a violation if logs were swept downstream during a flooding event. Staff feels like additional conditions should be added, stating that it would be a violation of the special exception permit for logs to be swept off the property during swept off the property during high water flooding events. And we have some draft language if the board would like to hear that. With that being said, I'd like to turn the floor over to Gavin Worley to review the details of the site plan and additional details I may have missed.
I'm sorry, Chris, you said draft language for.
The draft, so currently it would not be a violation if there was a flooding event and logs were swept off site. That would not constitute a zoning violation under the special exception permit or a violation of the permit. So as far as a draft condition that could be considered for that, in addition to a hearing, the site preparedness on the plan reference above, it shall be a violation of the special exception permit for any logs to be displaced off the property during high water / flooding events. So that could be utilized if y'all are if y'all would like it to make it a violation for logs to be swept off the property.
Well, that would be making a violation of the act of nature, right?
I'm sorry,
That would be making a violation of act of nature.
meaning,
If the logs are flooded, washed off the property, that's act of nature, right?
yeah, and we've had significant detailed conversations on this being in the 100-year floodplain. So the alternative of that would obviously would not to be storing the logs in the 100-year floodplain. But that was not that through the zoning text amendment, we felt that it could be the board and planning commission felt that it could be addressed during the special exception conditions. And so if you would like to make it a violation of logs being swept off the property, now would be the appropriate time. If not, you could have a major flood, logs go back, it would not be a violation. And it would be an act of nature. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But the act of not nature is placing the logs in the 100-year floodplain.
We do have a requirement for an engineering plan, which would do things to mitigate that possibility. Is that
That's correct.
to make sure, I just want to make sure
I don't think, and
got all
Gavin
my
can
remembrances
Gavin can
here.
attest to that a little bit better than I can. I don't, in conversation with Russ Orson, the engineer, Gavin is of course also a professional engineer. I don't think there's any assurances to be made that, yes, in a 100-year storm event, that, a very bad storm event, that these stacked logs will remain on the property. Again, it's just the flow of the creek, Carter's Creek and tributaries of.
Well, that's why we're here, public hearing, right? Let's hear what everybody got to say.
Mr. Worley coming forward.
Yes, Mr. Gavin Worley, Perkins and Orson.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me here. A couple of things I wanted to note, kind of taking off what Chris talked about. Part of the plan proposes for Crown Hardwoods in the event of forecasted flooding to ensure all logs are stacked on the site. Obviously, a stack of logs is going to be much more difficult for flood waters to move than an individual log that's just sitting on the ground. Furthermore, this area of the county is not in a detailed study, which means that there is no defined floodway. And this property is a good distance off of Carter's Creek. And so it would be anticipated that there wouldn't be flooding, significant velocities and associated with floodwaters.
Velocity is key there.
Yeah. And, and the velocity is what is going to move logs off the site if they're stacked, or if it's bad enough, it could potentially dislodge them from a stack. Also, we are proposing a fence that the engineer of record, Russ Orson, consulted with a couple fence builders and, reviewed some, like densities of logs and stuff to see what he felt was prudent. And so we're proposing cable fence to allow any logs that do float to get caught in the fence, which is before the landscaping. The first cable set up high enough off the ground to allow hopefully most sticks and twigs and stuff to flow underneath of it, so as not to catch a bunch of debris that's in floodwater to potentially lead to a failure of the fence. It is intended to only stop logs from leaving the site. But I think other than that, staff did a good job of summarizing the project. And I can answer any engineering questions regarding the site you may have.
Okay, I can't remember exactly what the distance was from center to the steel I-beams. I'm looking at the plan, but it's not.
Yeah, so I believe there are 4 steel I-beams proposed. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yep, there are 4 steel I-beams proposed, and then we're proposing treated posts 10 foot in the center between the steel I-beams. And the cables are supposed to be drilled through the center of the posts. So they won't be attached to the post.
All the posts, whether they're steel or wood or 10 feet.
Yeah, 10 foot space.
Yes, but say, okay.
So I guess my question to you is, does this plan, from what I understand, you have the logs must be in a flood warning. The logs then are, the plan is to collect those logs and to stack those logs further out of the floodplain. Not out of the floodplain, you can't do that, but move them higher ground.
Yes, and just ensure that there are no loose logs on the site. And because when they're in a stack, they're more stable to flood waters. So, I don't know necessarily logistically, it's going to depend on how full the yard is, whether or not they can shift everything to one side.
Mhm.
Certainly, I would think that, and Governor Beverly, representative of the owner, might be able to speak more because it's more like a logistics thing.
Okay. But because it seems to me that if the plan is to move them in case of high water, then you can't guarantee that they're not, it's an admission that you can't keep them on site if it requires moving them.
It's kind of a belt and suspenders approach. Stacking them is one level of protection, but then also moving them further away and stacking them is just adding to it.
Mhm.
I mean, if you have a Hurricane Camille flood of 69 event, it's hard to predict those kind of things.
Correct. I agree with you there. Thank you.
Would you say anything?
I'm gonna be able to crown hardwood. I mean, I just want everyone to know, I mean, we're persistent and we're gonna do everything we can to keep those logs there. I mean, the fence is gonna be capable on a regular, any high water, it's gonna catch them. I mean, the city of Buena Vista's got a flood wall there. They can't 100% guarantee the citizens that flood wall is gonna uphold the flood if it comes down through there. But, and if something happens and one does get across that fence, we'll do our job to get it back and make it right. Thank you.
Chris, do you have anything else before we open the public hearing?
No, I'll just add, I did work with Perkins and Orison to the entire sites. Maybe there's some road frontage that's out of the floodplain. So the ability, and of course with Planning Commission did talk about the ability to move the logs completely off site. That's problematic because the equipment required, the logging trucks, that type of thing is problematic, completely move them off site. So they came up with the idea of moving them to higher ground, if you will. And so it was originally originally an elevation on the ground, which I was concerned with because we don't know where that exact elevation. So as shown on the plan, there's a site preparedness note, and it has a known corner of the existing shop building and a known corner of one of the I-beams, the proposed I-beams that draws a straight line. And that's where a storm warning would come. That's where they would have to move the logs from the lower section of the log yard to the higher section of log yard, 2 known points. And I will say there's actually, during the Planning Commission, originally we came forward with all wooden poles with telephone poles, I believe, power poles on the corners, and the Planning Commission recommended the
I-beams, I think is the correct statement. And there's a total of 5 I-beams. The planning commission requested that there would be 1 I-beam in the middle of the western or eastern run, excuse me. And so there's actually 3 along the eastern run and then 2 more on the corners of the proposed fence.
Mhm.
Okay, let's open the public hearing for comments. Is there anyone signed up to speak?
No one signed up to speak, but
Okay,
we recognize you now.
is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this? Please state your name and magisterial district.
Calvert S. Fitzgerald II. I go by CS and I live in the South River District. I was looking at that map of the piece of property in this 100-year flood thing. And I can't help but sit back there and think to myself, if it gets that bad that we got to worry about logs, the rest of the county is in pretty bad shape. My family was in the sawmill business. We had a mill down along the Maury River there in Buena Vista. And we had logs get washed away, but we were in a current area. We're right beside Glenmore Park there. And when the river would get up, the current would get there. Looking at that map and knowing that area, I don't ever see a current situation unless it's so severe that we got worse problems to worry about than 15 logs floated down the river. Only point I would like to make. But I think if by dealing with Crown, my family dealing with Crown for 25 years, everything will be done like it's supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name's Tim Goodbar. I'm a resident, Cars Creek District, and I only reside about 2.5 miles from this operation where they propose to locate. First of all, I'm not a public speaker, and I'm going to have to struggle through this. I would like y'all to give serious consideration to issuing this conditional use permit. Where they're currently operating is small. It's a danger. To enter their driveway in and out there, we've got to go to extra precautions to get our trucks in and out of there. And one thing I forgot, I do own a small logging operation, and I do supply them with logs on occasion. I've been there my entire life. I lived through 69. I lived through 85. I lived through 95, and I've seen a lot of other things going on right there. With what this conditional use permit is proposing them to do with their cables and everything, I think that's going to be sufficient enough to keep those logs on that yard. And personally, I cannot see Crown Hardwoods allowing upwards to $6 million worth of logs to float down that creek. And I think they're going to do everything within their power to keep those logs on site. It's a good site. It's plenty of room. And I'd kind of like to add in closing, that's my parking spot and I need it. Thank you.
And anyone else wishing to speak?
We do have Mr. Hart online is asked to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, let me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. I've been following this. I didn't intend to speak, but since it's here, I think it's important. I think it's important for the business development that we have. And I think the engineers have done a reasonable job on something that engineers aren't ever taught how to do, keep logs on a place, in terms of coming up with a way to mitigate that. But the fact remains something still could leave. If it does, it has a high probability of blocking one of the bridges, either at Stillhouse Drive or West Midland Trail. Extremely high consequence events, but an extremely low consequence, or I'm sorry, low probability event. And the way we typically handle this was actually with insurance. And perhaps a reasonable requirement would be an insurance policy or a bond that would cover that in the eventuality. Loss of either of those bridges is a fairly substantial event. And when a bridge of that type is obstructed, it tends to get washed away. And I'd hate to see that happen. I'd also hate to see this development not go forward. Because we need this, Mr. Goodbar and I have talked about it, and we need a product for our logs, or we need the ability to move that product out of the county. And for the piece that we're discussing here, I think an appropriate amount of insurance might be a way to mitigate that risk and allow us to continue with business opportunity in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Is there anyone else online?
Don't believe so.
Was there any written comments or anything that need to be read into the minutes you received?
Yes, sir. I have one. This is from C. McCarthy. It says, "Good day. Again, out of town on the proposed day and did receive the certified letter the meeting 2/28/22. Imagine the yellow school bus drive down West Midland Trail 2 or 3 times a week, and the safety to our children and community well documented. This is an agricultural area. How about we support agricultural growth and animal safety? The proposed business is not only high risk to the local neighbors, but also to our Car Creek. The noise of big, heavy trucks is loud and unsafe for our rural community. Counter proposal is that the supervisors and other community groups help this business find another location that will meet their needs and afford them to prosper. Sincerely, C. McCarthy, deeply opposed."
Is that all the comments?
That is all we have, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. No one else wishing to speak at this point. We'll close the public hearing. Board, any questions, concerns, comments?
What was the language on that you were going to propose?
That could be utilized is, it would be falling under condition number 4. In addition to a hearing to the site preparedness plan, excuse me, I'll start over. In addition to a hearing to the site preparedness on plan reference above, it shall be a violation of the special exception permit for any logs to be displaced off of the property during high water / flooding events. So just to reiterate it, currently it would not be a violation for logs to be displaced off the property.
But it was a requirement initially. We have a requirement for to have a plan to keep all logs off from floating down,
Being able to be secured on site.
secured on site,
Yes.
which doesn't that mean not floating downstream? Correct.
Secured
right?
on site, yes.
Okay. So did this plan do that?
Did it? I don't think that, and Gavin's probably a better resource, or maybe even Russ Orson, who's obviously not here, but in my conversations with Russ, I don't think I think Gavin will reiterate this. I don't think there's any guarantees that a flood of the size of 1985 in this area, that this current plan can guarantee that the logs will be kept on site. And Gavin, I'll lean on Gavin on that one.
Yeah,
I will say we obviously do have a plan sealed by an engineer on how to secure the property, how to secure the logs on site.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wouldn't think you would be able to, an engineering study would be able to acknowledge an act of God. A flooding event of that magnitude. I don't know how you can plan for that.
That is correct. I mean, we can't guarantee that something is not going to leave the site. There's always a bigger flood. So you can go for the biggest one on record now, and there's always potential to have a bigger one. And so
People plan around flooding all the time and in flood zones. So just
correct.
correct.
That
Okay.
is correct. But it is always a risk analysis, and it's never a guarantee.
Mhm.
I mean, FEMA does not guarantee their floodplain delineations. They don't guarantee their elevations. It's documentation that they put out for engineers and the public and government entities to use for planning purposes.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's the sake of, it's just kind of one of the things of engineering. The engineer record, Mr. Orson, who is unfortunately not back in town yet, he used engineering judgment based on his license and his years of practice to determine the fence that was put forth with the proposal.
Thank you.
The question that was brought up by Mr. Hart as far as insurance, was that ever talked about during planning commission or anything?
No, sir.
I mean, I agree with one of the other speakers as well. I mean, that's their inventory. If it's calling for that severe of flooding, I look for them to do everything within their power to secure or remove the logs to save their inventory. And as far as the bridge goes, it was my understanding that, I mean, the property is not even in use right now, but there's been issues with the bridge and sediment there before, correct?
So the bridge that Mr. Hart was referring to was actually downstream to Muddy Lane. If I recall correctly, you go from the air site. The first public bridge you get to would be Muddy Lane. The second public bridge you get to downstream is Stillhouse. The one you're referring to is actually a tributary of Carrs Creek that gets blocked up. So there's been a lot of discussion on that particular bridge that is currently obstructed, if you will, with large boulders because of flooding events. And Mr. Orison has reached out to VDOT to attempt to have them clean out that bridge, but that's not the bridge that Mr. Hart is concerned with. His concern was the downstream, not upstream.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Just a couple of comments. I've been out to the site several times and met with people and it's my understanding that even during 85 and previous flood, there's not a lot of water that goes across that piece of property. I am pleased with how they're going to handle it. Of course, I say that, and who knows what tomorrow will bring, but I think they've done everything that they can. As far as traffic, go out there on election day and you can count the trucks going up and down. I guess it's not 60 there, but because they can't go on the interstate. So the traffic isn't going to be any different than it currently is. You got a trucking company there, and I think people who have been around, and maybe Mr. Goodbar could help us since he's been around a long time. That piece of land, the water that comes across it isn't coming up out of the creek. It's coming across the road because the path it normally takes is blocked. And if you unblock the path, it would go down that stream into the creek. So I think, and I will make a motion that we approve it, adding the condition and the wording about logs leaving the property. They probably never will. So we've done everything possible, and the company is a good company. And if their logs leave the property, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna take responsibility and make it right. So I'd make a motion, we approve
With the language?
with the language.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Can I hear the additional language one more time?
I'd like to hear it as well.
It would be placed in number 4, and that's because current number 4 references 2 and 3. So just for ease, it's condition number 4. In addition to a hearing to the site preparedness plan, referenced above, it shall be a violation of the special exception permit for any logs to be displaced off the property during high water / flooding events. And before we get, this is really twofold, and if I may just take a minute to add, this is actually twofold because it is very unusual to have the site preparedness notes on the site plan. So on condition number 1, we state substantial compliance with the plan prepared by Perkins and Orison. So that plan has the site preparedness notes in there, but at minimum, staff at very minimum you would want to reference those site preparedness notes in the conditions. And the reason is because we're not looking for substantial compliance with the site preparedness notes. We're looking for strict adherence to those site preparedness notes. So at a bare minimum, staff would recommend that the site preparedness notes be incorporated by reference in the conditions, not only placed in the site plan itself.
So if we move forward with the terminology that you're referencing to be added, they would be in violation of their permit, which would lead to,
Potential civil penalties and or revocation of the special exception permit.
Like everybody.
Yeah, it's very common. I mean, that we usually start with civil penalties if it gets that far. It would also be an opportunity to revisit, obviously. But again, currently, if we do, Lord forbid, we do have another flood and and some logs are displaced off the property, it would not be a violation.
yeah, I mean, and what would displaced off the property be? Would it be they leaned over the fence? Would it be they washed down 100 feet? I mean, what type?
I would say off the property would mean off the property.
You know, I'm just not sure how. I mean, I'm all for the business and doing the permit. I'm just not sure how we acknowledge an act of God with some sort of historical flooding event that, I mean,
I think that's a testament to, we had a lot of conversation at the planning commission about prohibiting this use in the floodplain. Obviously, that got to y'all's level and it got back, to the planning commission. So we do not prohibit in the 100-year floodplain. That was obviously a suggestion, but that's not what we did. So now we have a 100-year, we have an application for a log yard to be in the 100-year floodplain. So that's sort of, how we got to this point, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
yes,
No,
I'm sorry, please. Mr. Lewis.
I need some legal advice or Robert's rules. I'm not in support of adding the language. I support agriculture and business.
there's a
How
motion
does
and a
this?
second.
That's right, but the chairman hasn't called for a vote, ma'am. So we're discussing. How many, what, if the motion is defeated, we are not able to bring another motion for some period of time. Is that accurate to say?
I believe it's 12 months. You may make a motion to amend the motion, get a second, vote on the amended motion. And if that is approved, then vote on whether or not to amend. And then if that's approved, then you can vote on whether the amended motion should be approved or disapproved. Follow me?
So it's a request for an amended motion. No, I could make a motion to request an amended motion.
You would just make a motion to amend if you'd like to approve the motion, but with some change to it.
Yes.
And if there's a second to that and the majority votes in favor of that amendment, then the original motion would be amended to that amendment and everyone would vote on the original motion as amended.
So we have a motion and a second. We need to take a vote on that as it was entered.
No. Is that
or not?
Well, I'm hearing that it will get voted down, and I don't think that's what the majority of you want to do.
Well, I don't
And
want to
if
wait
you vote
another.
it down, it's done for 12 months.
Yeah, I don't want that.
But we don't want that amendment.
So another member can make a motion.
Another member can make a motion to amend the original motion.
Can I'm trying to understand, or am I still talking? Are we still talking here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Crown Harbor, Hardwood has said that that we have a plan that's to keep the logs on. That's why some of us voted to have this in floodplain. is because there would be a plan to keep these logs on site. They've produced a plan. They have said that they would. I'm not following what having repercussions, and the repercussions are not necessarily anything other than let's make a little bit of a change here to the plan. So I'm not following the problem with having this. Can someone explain to me, having someone say, yes, we will keep the logs on. We're telling our citizens that we're going to keep these logs on site and that this business is going to keep them on site. And why can't we back that up with a little bit of, if they're not on site, there's a penalty, small penalty.
It's an accident. It's an act of God or nature. If there's a flood that comes, I'm sorry, we're going to penalize these people because they were victims of a flood? I mean, I just don't.
And I feel, I hear you, and my feeling, to answer your question, also, sorry to interrupt, Bob, with the engineering plan, we've already gone to another step of requiring an engineering plan, which would go further than maybe just normal logical things to keep the logs on site. So I just feel we've already done probably more than in some other situations, and that if there's an engineering plan and they are in compliance with the engineering plan, then that settles the issue. If they're not in compliance with the engineering plan, which we've stipulated, then that could necessitate a violation. But
I know that you've taken it a step further than you had wished, but for me, this is putting something like this in a flood zone is a dangerous thing. It's yes, once in 100 years, but it's telling you that it's going to happen in 100 years, probably. So we have done this. We have requested a plan that keeps things on site. The citizens, the neighbors thinks that's what we're doing here. I have a problem with passing something that's really not. What we're saying is, no, we're really not sure that's going to happen.
I don't think that's what we're saying at all. I think we're saying that we're sure it's not going to happen. That's what the engineering plan says. Well, I'm not saying it. Mr. Worson is saying it.
When people, this is not uncommon to have penalties if something if something fails, correct?
Each one of these would be 1 through 6 would be, if they did not adhere to it, it would be a violation.
Right. We're saying as part of the plan is that in a flood warning that they need to go move the logs, right? Up
To a higher elevation on the same site. Yes, ma'am.
Which to me is already admission that having it in a flood zone is probably not a good idea, but okay. I can get on board with that. So we're moving it. But what if it's not Crown? What if it's not these gentlemen what we all trust to do the right thing? What if it's another owner that doesn't do the right thing? Are we not going to say that we're willing to penalize them for that? That's my feeling. So
When there are violations in any conditional use, what occurs?
The Office of Community Development will write a zoning violation letter and
what
have,
happens then?
they have the right to appeal that to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right. And they go before the Board of Zoning Appeals and say,
If they do appeal that, they go through the.
okay, if they don't appeal it, they just have a letter in their file?
That's correct. In most circumstances, and sometimes, very rarely do we ever start with a civil penalty.
Right. And so if you had 100-year flood and some logs left, they'd have a letter in their file. And I guess you'd wait for another 100-year flood to occur to get a second letter and maybe take it a step further. So I don't.
And just to clarify, and Gavin, I might have to lean on you on this one. It's not once every 100 years, because obviously we've had multiple 100-year flood events in the last, 20, 30 years. With that being said, it's a 1% chance of flooding in this area per year. Is that correct, Gavin?
It's a 1% chance of a flood magnitude occurring in any given year. That's the way it works. It's 0.01% chance of occurring. This is the way it shakes out, or 0.01 is the way it works. And so FEMA isn't saying that this is a flood that occurs once every 100 years. It's a probability and statistics thing.
Right, and there's a 99% chance that it won't happen. And even if it did, we have some safety measures in place. So I don't know why everyone is so concerned over the falls.
I'm concerned, as I feel in this case, as Mr. Slayton pointed out, it's been talked about and talked about and talked about, we're 6-7 months. It does represent something good to talk about when we're talking about zoning text amendments and adding special entity or reasons that special can apply for a special exception permit. But this represents to me almost another zoning text amendment change, because I don't see this happening necessarily in other industry or other times or other. I'm just, the word's not coming to me, and that's what I see.
You're saying requiring another zoning text amendment to initiate this.
Well, that's what it would almost seem to me to be.
And I will respectfully disagree, because that's the very same reason that we said, the Board of Supervisors said that these should be handled by case basis in the flood zone. So it's, we were going to do that as far as a zoning text amendment pertaining to flood zone, but we decided not to.
And I respectfully disagree with that. So anyway, that's my thing. It just seems like we're almost back to starting over. I just feel we had good conversation. We came to the decision that a wood yard could be in an agricultural district. We came to the decision a wood yard could be in a flood in an agricultural district. We said, if you're going to have one, you've got to have an engineering plan that says somebody else is reviewing that this stuff is going to be here.
It says that they're secured on site.
Yes, ma'am. So we've done well beyond what we might have done to ensure that something bad doesn't happen. But when you get to a certain point, you just can't anymore. I mean, I was comfortable where we were, and I just see this as another level of hurdle. So
Mr. Slayton, your addition that you were wanting to add, was the applicant made aware of that, or?
Absolutely, yes.
And what was their thoughts?
We had a brief conversation. I had a conversation with Russ Orson weeks ago on this. And then I had a brief conversation with Mr. Worley last week, I think, and followed up the conversation this morning. And I had a conversation with Gunnar Beverly this morning, and it really wasn't much of a conversation, to tell you the truth. I mean, Gunnar, do you want to expand on that? I don't think there was much, there was not much concerns expressed on the proposed amendment, proposed condition, I should say.
I call for the question.
I don't know what that means.
Debate. Have to vote on the motion. Am I,
well, if it gets voted down, then we have no log yard.
I
And
don't think it's gonna be voted down.
well, I'm not prepared to vote for something that includes the additional language. This is the motion that we have.
Well, as I see it, we in a a situation where it's either that or none. So therefore, I'm gonna be in favor of it, but I'm not gonna carry the amendment or the addition much weight to it. God rains on us and the log roll floods off, write a letter, put it in the file, and forget about it. I mean,
Well, yeah, I understand.
It's either we pass this and they can get on with business.
Which I
or
would support.
We
Yes, sir.
don't,
Absolutely.
and
Mr. Chair, I think the owner would like to say something.
So to my knowledge, what you said with the original motion they had was they could make another motion to amend that amendment and then vote on that. So you don't have to vote on it the way it is right now. You can make a motion to amend that and then make the vote, right?
That's right. Then the original motion
Will be adjusted.
would be adjusted to the motion without that, whatever it is.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
Before you, do you have a problem with the
Yeah,
stipulation?
are we able to?
Or does that create a problem for you and your company?
I mean, my only concern is if he mentioned the word revoke our special use permit. I mean, we got that fence engineer to,
Well,
any flood that's came in the
That's
history.
like the death penalty if you completely ignored everything, I think.
Right, but it's
That's
still
up.
it's still a possibility.
Well, it's a possibility with any of those conditional uses too.
But I'm saying with every flood that's happened in the history, we shouldn't have a problem. Now, I
Exactly.
can't guarantee you that it won't rain for 40 days straight.
Right.
But I mean,
And
those houses
yeah.
that were built down through there were engineered in the floodplain. They can't guarantee you that a flood won't come up there and wash that house away.
Exactly right. But I would hope that whoever sits up here has enough sense to recognize that too.
And I will add, and I know we're getting late in the evening, but you know, we use the example of houses in the 100-year floodplain, and you could build a house here. However, you are required to design it. You're required to determine a BFE, a base flood elevation, and you're required to build that house with booster up footers and required it to be 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain. So that is the type of engineering that staff was expecting on this particular application, but we did not receive it. We don't know the base flood elevation. We don't know the velocity of the water. We you know, and in fact, the planning commission made some significant modifications to the fence plan after the engineer submitted it. And when I say significant modifications, it changed from 4 to 5 poles, and it went from wooden poles to H beams, I beams, whatever the proper word is.
So, I mean, we just want a fair shake on it. If everything else in the county that has something in the floodplain, if they're held responsible, if it's that way for them, then okay. But if it's not, then I think it should be fair for everyone. Thank
you. And before we do vote, as has been said, you know, you find them in violation, you stick the violation in the file and you move on. That may be fine with this group of supervisors. Supervisors change and thoughts and feelings can change on that. Probably the wording that I have the most problem with is revoking their permit. If they're putting all this money and time and energy into fixing the property to the engineering report, if we want to hold them in violation, it's fine, but I don't think we should revoke their permit so that they can continue to do business.
I don't think we want to do that either. But I think if there's a violation, we want to look at a way to prevent it from happening a second time, is my thing. And that's why it usually starts with a letter. What caused the breach? You know, and I don't, Chris, you can answer better than I. Does anybody ever have their permit revoked for an initial violation that you're aware of?
Not in the 19 years I've been here, no, sir. We haven't revoked a special exception permit in the 19 years we've been here.
And it would require the same process, a public hearing with public comment and the board's making the decision for something like that.
To revoke.
Right.
I respect Mr. Sladen immensely and the planning and the zoning work that goes into it. I think, Ms. Huffman, I just realized I should ask you with your experience in zoning, and language and obviously legal matters, is this, is this, is there precedent? Is it in keeping? Is it, I guess Mr. Slayton wouldn't have suggested it were it not. So I want to respect that work, but I'm trying to think through this.
I would say that I can't think of a similar situation to compare what's being considered to this. This is fairly unique, and I think the entire process has been fairly unique in terms of addressing what the requirements should be for a business like this in floodplain, and trying to accommodate and balance the interests of everyone. So I can't point to specific precedent. All I can do is point to the fact that the special exception permit process is set up so that the board can consider conditions that relate directly to the situation on that given property. Does that help? Bert?
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Before we vote, you've heard legal counsel. Is there anything to do with amendment or not?
I make a motion that we amend the previous motion to not include the addition, to go with what was presented as was presented.
So now we have that motion. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second.
Have a second.
You vote on that.
So we're voting on amending it to remove the language that Mr. Slading added to the proposal that we had.
That's right.
And just to clarify, that's to remove all, we're not even considering incorporating the site preparedness notes in the conditions. We're not interested in doing that. I'm just making sure.
This is something.
That's a motion, so we can roll, we can.
No, well,
So I'm not trying to batter it, but in addition to adhering to the site preparedness plan reference above, then I think the condition that we're having issue with, it shall be a violation of special exception for logs to be displaced off the property. With that being said, I think Ms. Huffman and I would agree that it's a good idea to have the site preparedness notes in the actual condition, not only associated with the plan, but in the actual conditions.
and the site preparedness notes would include like the engineering plan,
The site preparedness notes are.
SCP.
What's that?
Is that what's our,
No, there's notes on the actual page that say, when storm warnings are issued, all logs shall be stacked. Stacks lower elevation shall be, stacks in the lower elevations of the property shall be moved along the area of 850 higher elevation of the site where they should remain until the warning is lifted or the flood event passes. And number 3, maintain the cable and fence in good condition and free of collective debris, vines, or other vegetation. So my problem with that is that we do reference the plan, of course, with substantial compliance, but we're not looking for, I don't think we're looking for, staff is not looking for substantial compliance with the site preparedness. We're looking for strict guidelines that this will happen in
So,
a substantial manner.
so is the big problem the line about logs leaving the property?
being in violation? Yes, sir.
Right, so if you took that out and I don't think anybody should have a problem with making sure those, what's already written just becomes part of the condition.
I thought that was already included.
No,
My
it wasn't.
understanding, the
It-
only thing that was new was the
No.
violation.
No, it wasn't. So if we can amend it to leave out that violation and leave the notes in, is everybody good? I think I could live with that.
I could too, and I'm not sure how to get there now that we
When
have.
when we amend the motion, that's how we get there.
Well, I already asked to amend, but
Right, you didn't say what to amend it to.
I did. I said as presented
Okay,
originally, which didn't include that.
So one suggestion is no one seconded and the motion fails, and then someone brings up another amended motion.
Can we
Can
we
can
change your
Mr.
motion
Lewis
to
just
amend?
change his motion?
I think you can.
Yes.
Yes,
I
think we
can.
yes, you can modify your
Okay,
motion to amend.
so I make, well, do I just say I'm modifying my motion?
Yes.
I'm modifying the motion just made to include substantial compliance with the site preparedness notes.
No, sir. I
Okay.
apologize. You're actually incorporating the site preparedness notes.
All right, to include, I'm amend my motion to include the site preparedness notes
Yes.
in the ordinance
As
As it-
a condition. Yes, sir.
as a condition. So we're adding a condition to what was originally presented to us this evening or on Thursday night.
But not include
The, the,
the latter portion.
The
of
latter
that
portion, which-
suggested violation.
So there's no penalty whatsoever for logs leaving,
That's
correct.
correct.
even if they did not follow the notes in that, even if they were not moved during a flood warning.
It would be a violation not to move them, but there's no definition of stacking. There's no, so it would be a violation not to move them during storm warnings, because you watch for a warning, obviously.
And see, I think that's where we're coming from. I mean, that they have a study that says in this instance, you need to stack, you need to move. I think where some members are having the issue with is you can't control everything. And if.
But you can control whether someone complies, correct?
Right. You can control whether they
That's
stacked or
all we're
moved.
trying to do.
And I think
Right.
that's what we're trying to do.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
But
and have a
there's no
plan.
penalty for not doing it is my
Well,
problem.
there's always a
There
penalty.
would be,
That would be a
it
penalty.
would be deemed in violation.
In violation, but no financial penalty, no revoked, you can't
No,
revoke their
it
permit.
could, I mean, we have done financial penalties in zoning violations, absolutely. I mean, and zoning violations, I mean, we do a financial penalty and that's not a revenue source. What we are after, the Office of Community Development, the zoning portion is after is compliance, obviously. And so with that being said, the deterrent would be the zoning violation. And then on top of that, first, I think it's $200 penalty or whatever it may be. But our goal is compliance, obviously.
So we have a motion and second, and then we have a motion to amend with a second.
Are you seconding the motion to amend?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so now you vote on the motion to amend.
Okay. So voting on the motion to amend, Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
No,
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
chair votes yes. All right, now do we,
Now, the original motion is amended to add the condition for the site preparedness notes, but not for violation for the logs
leaving the yard?
leaving the property.
So we need to vote on that now.
So now you need to
It's
vote
back
on
to
that.
the original motion.
You're back to the original motion, but with the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
no.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank y'all for your patience.
Okay, we have Thunder Bridge Campground LLC, application for a special exemption permit for Cultural Arts Center in the Agricultural Transitional Zoning District. Mr. Slayton.
Yes, I have a, let me do that, just close the land development regulations, but let's see. All right, this is a special application for a cultural arts center, special exception permit with Thunder Bridge Campground LLC. A little bit about the property. Property is located at 1425 Arnold Valley Road, Natural Bridge Station, Virginia, owned by Thunder Bridge Campground LLC. Tax map number 113-A-7. Consists of 94.651 acres per tax records, located in the agricultural zoning district, agricultural transitional zoning district, that is. Per section 603B.13-13 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations, cultural arts centers are used by special exception in the agricultural transitional zone. Per section 302.56, cultural arts centers are defined as a group or groups of facilities where leasing fee or admission fee is charged for groups or individuals gather for the purpose of participating in the creation or enjoying arts and or crafts, either within an enclosed structure or in its vicinity, and where art shows, craft shows, and classes, demonstrations may be held. There was a fairly significant discussion at the Planning Commission on what cultural arts centers would include, what would be the permitted and what would not be permitted under this special exception application. Based on that discussion, I felt it'd be beneficial to review the definitions that would be utilized during the review of the proposed. So cultural, and these are all from Webster's, are of or relating to culture. Art is the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, especially in the production of aesthetic options, objects and crafts, is an occupation, trade, or activity requiring manual dexterity or artistic skill. With that being said, per the emphasis on making things by hand, this would not be an outright prohibition on the use of machinery and or power tools. And I'm certainly not saying that machinery and power tools could not be utilized for making arts and or crafts. But I would not consider the making of cabinets, picnic tables, or Adirondack chairs as examples of uses that would be permissible under the Cultural Arts Center. At the PC meeting, there was also some discussion of renting space to musicians. Throughout the zoning text amendment process, it was stated that two uses, that's the Art Center and the Cultural Arts Center and Cultural Arts Center and Cultural Music Center were two different uses and should be separate definitions and separate uses per the code. And so that's exactly what we did. Per the Board of Supervisors, they approved the zoning text amendment that separated these two uses. Again, Cultural Arts Center and Cultural Music Center. So therefore, it's my interpretation that the current special exception permit does not pertain to music. In September 8th, excuse me, that's a correct date, January, I think it was the 11th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and has recommended approval of special application with the following conditions. Number one, substantial compliance with development plan titled Thunder Bridge Cottages, Barracks, and Classrooms dated February 9th, 2022. Cultural Arts, and number two, Cultural Art Center limited to 34 art and or craft studios. Number three, Cultural Arts Center is limited to 36 events, art and or craft shows per calendar year. Number four, owner and tenants shall not engage in any large scale production. Number five, adequate off-street parking facility traffic control provided, no parking along Arnold Valley Road. That's further identified as 759. Number six, all trash will be taken directly landfill and not collection centers or county green boxes. Number seven, lighting shall be in compliance with 1300 of the land development regulations. And number eight, approval contingent on the Virginia Department of Transportation, Health Department, and Building Department approvals. The Office of Community Development staff is recommending condition number 4 be removed from the conditions. The condition states that the owner and tenants shall not engage on any large scale production. This recommendation to remove this condition is not intended to change what is authorized or what is not authorized, but it's to avoid conflict in the numbers of products and the scale of automated in evaluating each business. Large scale products or even medium scale products is not the intent of a cultural arts center and could be exploited in the future. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to the Thunder Bridge Campground owners, the Panabaker family, to review the additional details of the project.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yeah, I got one.
I thought you said that whose recommendation is to strike 4?
That is the Office of Community Development staff. That is essentially myself.
Okay,
And the reason is, the reason is, and of course, Chad, Ms. Huffman about this, it's ambiguous. Large scale production is defined as including many parts. When you look up many, it's ambiguous and very hard to enforce. It's hard to define. Once you define it, then it's hard to enforce.
okay,
And I think it's taken care of, personally, I think it's taken care of in the actual part, the actual definition of a cultural art center, as far as enjoyment of arts and or crafts. We have a definition of art, we have a definition of crafts.
Could you, I know you told us, could you recap the definition of cultural arts center?
The Cultural Arts Center is defined as a facility or group of facility where leasing fee or admission fee is charged and groups or individuals gather for the purpose of participating in the creation of or enjoying arts and or crafts, whether in closed structure or in a vicinity, and where art shows, craft shows, and classes / demonstrations may be held.
Mr. Slade, may I ask a question? When you talk about large scale production, I understand what you're saying, but what if a person used the wood shop to teach citizens how to make a picnic table? Is that, to me, that is a craft that's being passed on as a form of teaching, not necessarily production. Is that allowable?
The teaching part would certainly come, demonstrations may be held, but it would be a demonstration of arts and or crafts.
Yes.
So I would not consider the making of a picnic table with a traditional chop saw, your traditional layout stencil, here's your 8 foot, here's your 8 foot, put A to B, B to C, C to D, and you have a picnic table. I would not consider that an art or a craft.
Let's hear from Hanover.
I'll stop sharing my screen. Turn it over to this pen.
I'm James Panabecker, member of Rockbridge Campground LLC. Of course, I'm here to urge you to approve our application for a cultural arts center special exception. On May 24th, 2021, you approved our special exception for a campground and private seasonal camp. This approval incorporated the plan we submitted and specifically mentioned the buildings to be used for athletic and exercise activities, arts, crafts, and music. Because the planning department determined that any use of our buildings needed to be related to our campers, and we wanted to be able to offer access to the general public, we worked together on the Cultural Arts Center zoning text amendment you approved last month. We then applied for this Cultural Arts Center special exception. The Planning Commission received at least 30 letters supporting the special exception, including many from neighbors. It received no objections and unanimously recommended approval, 5-0. I'd like to mention a few of those letters. Conrad Madiuk, a photographer, expressed the general content of many of the letters when he said, "I believe having another venue in which local artists would be able to participate and where adults and children could engage in arts and crafts activities would be a win-win for the local community and the artists in the area." Roy Faber, a former member of this board, said this cultural arts center would complement the tourism sector of the county, further solidifying the Rockbridge area as a place to visit, shop, and enjoy. According to Bill Wydrow, resurrecting this abandoned juvenile detention complex will provide lots of studio room for arts, crafts, music, theater, dance, and more, and will offer many opportunities to the members of our community, both to the artists, performers who participate, and to those who go to see their works. Several former employees of the Natural Bridge Juvenile Correction Center expressed their delight that the property could become a magnet for the arts. For example, Nancy Johnston, who worked there as a psychologist and remains a neighbor, said that through her experience as a dancer and actor, she knows how difficult it can be to find a just right space for community theater and dance. She said that when she moved to the county, she tried to find a place in southern Rockbridge to teach dance to children and teens, but she never found a location that would work. She says 44 years later, it looks like the very place I tried to find then has now presented itself. I like the term Mr. Slayton came up with, Cultural Arts Center. It sounds impressive, and someday the Thunder Bridge Cultural Arts Center could be impressive. I can imagine someday walking through Thunder Bridge, I pass the performance studio, what used to be a gym, and hear a youth orchestra warming up, actors rehearsing, or the gentle thumps of a dance troupe practicing. A little farther on, someone has left open a door, and I see a group of children forming pots from clay. I smell oil paint as I pass another studio. A few teenagers sit under a tree sketching Thunder Ridge. What a picture. We at Thunder Bridge are very pleased with the community's interest and support for our Cultural Arts Center concept. We're excited about welcoming the general public to our property. I wanted to refer a little bit to the definition of art and craft, which, as you know, I think when the zoning ordinance does not specifically define something, we turn to the dictionaries to find out what it means. And I Googled that, and the standard definition of art refers to the various branches of creative activity, such as painting, sculpture, music, literature, theater, and dance. More generally, art is a diverse range of human activities engaged in creating visual, auditory, or performed works that express the creator's imaginative or technical skill and are intended to be appreciated for the beauty or emotional power. Now, when you approved our special exception a year ago for the campground, the plan included and specifically mentioned buildings to be used for athletic and exercise activities, arts, crafts, and music. The special exception that we wrote up just now did not go into that kind of detail because the zoning text amendment refers to arts and crafts, and by definition, we go to the dictionary to find out what those mean. And our intention all along from the start, when we talked about music last time, was to include music, arts, crafts, music, and other creative theater, dance, other creative endeavors. Please approve this special exception. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Board, is there any questions for Mr. Pannenberg?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Pannenberg.
Thank you.
This time we'll open up the public hearing. Is anybody signed up to speak? Is there anyone online wishing to speak?
I don't see anybody with a hand raised.
Okay. Is there any letters or emails that need to be read into the minutes?
Yes, sir. We do have a couple of them. The first, I'm gonna read them in the order that was received, is from Denise Schaefer. It's addressed to Mr. Slayton, members of the Rockbridge County Planning Commission. However, it went to y'all's email, the citizen comment, so it's appropriate to read. I am a Rockbridge County resident who supports Thunder Bridge Cultural Arts Center special exception, opening their arts and crafts studios and to the general public will offer many benefits to members of our community. It would be nice to be able to see adults and children coming and going, engaging in arts and crafts and activities. Thank you, Denise Shaver, 40 Mountain View Court, Natural Bridge, Virginia. This one is, my husband is from Tom Craft and Wendy Berger on 236 Hill Cemetery Road, Natural Bridge Station. My husband and I have lived in Rockbridge County for 20+ years. We are pleased when Youth Correctional Facility on Arnolds Valley Road was purchased. We support Thunder Bridge Cultural Arts Center special exception. Opening the the art studio and craft resources to the general public may offer benefits to the member of Rockbridge community. We would welcome the public and look forward to participating with our county residents at Thunder Bridge, engaging in arts and creating of crafts, art pieces at the Cultural Arts Center. These activities will benefit all residents, children, and adults, and even the older population. Thank you for considering the special exception that will benefit the Valley in a positive way. Again, Tom Kraft and Winnie Berger from Natural Bridge Station. The third and final we've received via mail is to the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors, or excuse me, Rockbridge County Supervisors. I'm writing to voice my support for Thunder Bridge Cultural Arts Center special exception application. Hearing through friends what a great spot and its owners hope to do open arts and crafts studio space to the community and public participation and use. I'm pretty excited for what could bring us to our area, for what that could bring to the area in terms of community arts activities, opportunities for our different areas to mix and mingle, our families and kids to do creative things together. It sounds like an endeavor that would be a plus for our larger community, and this community is such a beautiful, special one. It deserves outlets like this. If we're not growing, we're stagnating. Let's keep growing and approval of this project. Thanks so much, Karen Waller, 172 Cold Run Road. And I will note, I will add on Mr. Panabaker's comments. We had a large number of similar emails in support at the Planning Commission level. And when I say large level, it's probably 30 plus.
Thank you, Mr. Slade. Okay, this time we'll close public hearing. Board, any comments, questions?
Mr. Slayton, again, we've defined, I believe I understood you to say Cultural Arts Center and Cultural Music Center are now two different.
That's correct.
Expressed differently. Not listed in the conditions for this, or doesn't seem to be the request for this art center is music. Now, I think Mr. Panbaker was just talking about music and having that included. Is that included, or is that a separate?
And Ms. Huffman may piggyback off this, but in my opinion, it would not be included.
Would that be?
The application didn't include anything about a music center, and it was not advertised for a music center. And there are two very specific separate definitions, so I don't think you can interpret one to mean the other.
Right. Well, that was what I was thinking, but I wanted to be sure. I'm sensitive to, the business person trying to make the best use and the most use of their property. And I think both of those things would enhance the community, but we approved a special exception for a campground. Now we're approving a special exception for this. I'm not sure what we're doing here, I guess.
You want to do it all at once, right? Jay? Me too. Let's do it all at once.
I mean, I don't know if, but I don't want to set unreal expectations, or it sounds like maybe we're not all on the same sheet of music.
So if music and cultural arts are separated, in order to have music, whether in a building or outside, they would have to apply for another special exception permit?
Yes, sir. They're listed as separate uses within that district.
Okay.
So you apply for one or the other or both. He can apply for them successfully or successively, but one does not mean the other.
Okay, and since we had a public hearing and advertisement and all based off of cultural arts, at this, we can review and vote on that, but we cannot add to it with music at this point in time?
That's correct.
Okay.
I will piggyback off that. There's a third option, potentially a third option, if you want to do an outdoor music festival or an event like Boxerwood does. They come to you for an annual permit that is aside from the cultural music center definition. So that would be either a one-time permit or a one-time annual permit for multiple events, I should say.
I guess, and what I'm hearing from the board is, we probably be in support of such. It just needs to go through the proper application process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I have another question. Back to the Arts Center, Mr. McDaniel used the example of demonstration of how to make a picnic table. And that, it didn't sound like that was one of what this says an art or craft is. Is that?
That's correct.
Right. All right. So what
I mean,
what is that? What is it that doesn't go with art or craft?
Well, I
Back
think
to the
one,
definitions
it depends on
again.
how you're making the table. If it's with, again, if it's with a cut sheet and A, B and going to B, it has to incorporate, again, some manual dexterity for a craft. And then the art itself with creating activity resulting in the see if I gotta go back to this.
May I interject for just a second? I've been thinking about that as well. If you were weaving a wicker chair, or if you were doing like post and peg, putting something together, that putting logs together or something to create a table or create a chair that is kind of a craft, it's a little bit different than if you will, stamping out,
I got
you
you.
know, three.
Yeah, I finally heard manual dexterity, which I know he said earlier. That I agree. That makes sense. But I guess then when Thunder Bridge finds more needs, I'm just struggling with the right process. I don't want them not to do this, but I don't want to. I mean, they have to come back every 5 minutes.
It's okay. We enjoy seeing them.
And I guess my question would be, as a follow-up to Mr. Lewis, there is a wood shop, I believe, on the facility. It may even be auto mechanic type shop on the facility. It's somewhat, and here's where I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the whole production thing. I understand if they lease the property to you and you come in and you build 50 picnic tables a week and you're selling them, that's production. I get that. But if you come in and teach a class to area citizens about how to build a picnic table, and you use the shop, you use the tools that are there, you're passing along knowledge in my mind, and that's cultural, in my mind. I may not be correct to your definition. So how does that align with what is in the application and what we're looking at right now?
The example of one could be said about the auto mechanic garage or a body work garage. So I would not consider, as a zoning administrator, I would not teaching classes on rebuilding a carburetor or painting a fender, painting a door, body work, Mondo, etc., be considered a cultural appropriate use under the cultural arts center definition. Now, if we want to expand their ability to utilize the existing property and everyone else's property, in the agricultural transitional district by special exception, we could certainly add a body work shop in there. We could certainly add, sort of change the word studio to shop is essentially what we're discussing.
Yeah, I mean, the facility just has.
And that's as usual. And I mean, to talk about this about Mr. Pennebaker, it is unusual because what we're doing is we have a facility and now we're trying to find appropriate uses for it. It's also in a very rural part of the county, a somewhat rural part of the county, if you will. But with that being said, that is not the normal way we usually do it. We usually have a piece of ground and then develop a facility. So you have umpteen buildings on this piece of the property that the Pannebakers have purchased and now are adapting to the use. And it was very, to back up a little bit, as far as the arts, crafts, and music, as far as the campground, it was very clear before, during, and after the presentation that the campers could certainly utilize all these services as an amenity, just like any other campground, and provide some of these amenities for the campers. But that's completely different in leasing it out to non-campers, in my opinion.
It's a good point. With delineation.
If, and I'm fine with what's being presented, I'm just asking a question. If they wanted to pursue use of the shop for building crafts, whatever it may be, widgets, picnic tables, chairs, whatever, as a teaching method.
You could certainly, I mean, if that's the only thing, which is very unlikely that someone would come in here and say, okay, well, I'm going to start building whatever it was, picnic tables, and that's the only thing I'm going to do. I mean, we've had a similar situation where someone was planning on doing that, but maybe opening it up to the public every now and then. That's more common definition. But if we wanted to go back and allow for a woodworking shop in an agricultural zone, not associated with the cottage industry, not associated with anyone living on the property whatsoever, that's a separate zoning text amendment.
Okay, that they could apply for and move forward with, and that.
The zoning text amendments can be initiated by a motion of the planning commission or a resolution by the board of supervisors. And that would be to allow a woodworking shop in the agricultural zoning district, which ironically enough, going back to last one, we had a lot of interest in the BB Air site as a woodworking shop. During when it was for sale, because it was for sale as a commercial building. In fact, it was a commercial building unique to excavating. But once we got past that hurdle, I had about 3 or 4 phone calls that wanted to utilize that as a commercial shop, woodworking.
Okay. Well, being in my district, I'm fine with what's being presented as long as the Panabakers are okay with it. And I would just say that as you grow in your property and you find new uses or ways that the property can be used by the citizens, please consult with me. I'll be happy to bring it before the board and do everything we can to work with you. So, having heard the recommendation, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Could I get clarification? Okay, I was going to ask the same thing Chris was. Is that with or without his recommendation?
Could you state your recommendation one more time, please?
My recommendation is to remove the Office of Community Development staff is recommending condition number 4 be removed from the condition. The condition states that the owner and tenant shall not engage in any large scale production. Again, I'm just going to reiterate this. The recommendation is to remove the condition is not intended to change or what is authorized or what is not authorized, but to avoid conflict with the numbers of products and the scale of automation in evaluating each business that comes through. Large scale production or even medium scale production is not the intent of the Cultural Arts Center and could be exploited in the future. So it's a very ambiguous, I apologize because the planning commission did of course recommend that. It was brought up at the planning commission. We did not have time to legislate from the bench and it was included in the large scale, but I think it's very ambiguous.
So your recommendation is to remove
Just to
number 4.
remove that portion.
Does your motion,
My motion includes removal of number 4.
does your second?
Then I will second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any board comments? Hearing none, we need to go into closed session as permitted by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A5, discussion pertaining to economic development concerning prospective business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community.
We gave you another one.
I read the wrong one. Okay. As permitted by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3, discussion or consideration of a matter involving acquisition of real property for public purpose. Is that accurate?
Where discussion in open meeting.
Where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect county's bargaining position or negotiating strategy. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons.
Yes.
Ms. Ayers, Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
And chair votes yes. We are now in closed session.
Then we got to certify.
We're back. As a motion.
I move that the board certify that in closed meeting just concluded, to the best of each member's knowledge, nothing was heard, discussed, or considered except the matter of or matters especially identified in the motion to convene in closed session and that lawfully permitted to be discussed as exempt from open meetings requirements under the previous under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Second. All right, so we have a motion second. Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons.
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis. And Chair votes yes. All right, is there anything else to be discussed? Move to adjourn. All right. Mr. Lyons. Yes. Mr. Lewis. Mr. Day.
Sure.
Ms. Ayers.
Yes.
And Chair votes yes.